So the question of the day, Ann, is how do governmental employers report both the payment of these FFCRA payments, but not the offsetting credits and refunds on this new Form 941? So we'll just kind of walk you through the answer here. And so Ann, jump in at any time too. So as we said, there's a lot of the form that hasn't changed. And for employers that don't have any FFCRA payments and don't have any credits or tax deferrals that they're applying for, they really can kind of breeze through some of the new lines and sections. However, for a governmental employer that did have some FFCRA payments that were paid out during the year, we'll kind of walk through how that needs to be reported. So first and foremost, in part 1, line 2, where employers have always historically reported federal taxable wages, that line should still include all federal taxable wages, including FFCRA pay. That should be in line 2. That's going to correspond to, if you total up all 4 quarters of your 941s, that's going to correspond to box 1 and probably box 16 on your Form W-2. Then if we jump down to line 5A, taxable Social Security wages, this is where we start to see some differences. So because FFCRA payments aren't subject to that employer side of the Social Security tax, in line 5A, we're only going to report taxable Social Security wages, not including FFCRA pay. So this is everything else that employer paid out that's not FFCRA that is subject to Social Security. Should go in line 5A. Then we start to differentiate. Ann, do you want to talk through lines 5A1 and 5A2?
Yes. So then, as Leah said, in 5A1 and 5A2, we'll differentiate between the qualified sick leave wages for employees who are experiencing symptoms or who have a diagnosis for COVID-19. And these wages are usually paid at 100% of the regular rate. So in column 1, we'll include the wages paid. And then in 5A2, then we will include the qualified family leave wages, which are the wages that were paid at 2/3 of the regular rate due to someone having to care for a child or another family member or something like that.
Yep, no, exactly right. And so then we highlighted here too, you'll notice that the reason we have to pull those out separately is because they're only the employee side of the Social Security tax is being applied and carried over to column 2. So really critical that employers are able to separate out those 2 types of FFCRA payments and that they're keeping those separate from all of their other regular taxable Social Security wages. Then if we move on to sort of the bottom half of that first page of the Form 941, we really kind of get into an area that I think, Ann, even you and I kind of had to really dig into the instructions to come to some conclusions on. So can you talk a little bit about line 11B and this non-refundable portion?
Yes. So this line is a little bit unique for government employers. As you can see, you would usually use worksheet 1, which is the new additional worksheet included in the instructions for the 941 to determine your portion of the credit for qualified sick and family leave wages. But Leah and I's interpretation of the guidance on this we think that you would leave this blank, as since government employers are not eligible for the credit for the wages paid and the employer Medicare portion, as worksheet 1 is helping you calculate those amounts. So you would leave that blank and move on to the next page.
Yep, I agree. There's a lot of different ways to get to the same answer, but that's how we're interpreting the guidance. Yeah, thank you, Ann. So as you move on to the second page of the Form 941, Part 1, it is some familiar fields and thrown in some additional fields for some of these credits. So just important to note that you're gonna back into the total taxes after adjustments, which is line 12. That's something that we've been using before, but it also takes into account those non-refundable credits now, which government employers aren't going to be entering into that line. Line 13A is just your total tax deposits for the quarter. So you'll want to make sure you're entering all second quarter deposits. And then really this line 13C, this refundable portion of credit for qualified sick and family leave wages. Again, even though you've paid out those wages as an employer, you would still leave this field blank because government employers are not eligible for any refundable or non-refundable credits or refunds. So that again can be left blank, and you can kind of walk yourself through the rest of the calculations. Should be fairly self-explanatory. Also keeping in mind line 13D, anything referring to an employee retention credit, government employers are going to be able to just skip right over that because they're not eligible for that either. And you should be able to get yourself down to either the balance due or overpayment, and you'd handle that just like you historically have on your Forms 941.
And then this last page, there wouldn't really be anything additional to fill out as since you're not eligible, since government employers are not eligible for the employee retention credit or the FFCRA credits. So you normally just fill this out as normal. If you ever had to fill out 17 or 18, you would do that, but you'd fill out as normal, and the remainder of the form would be as usual.
Yeah, very good. And the bottom half of page 3 is just your standard signatures, third-party designee field. So you'd fill those out as you typically would, and hopefully you'll have worked your way through your first updated Form 941.